Well, the topic of immigration is an issue for the entire country, but living here in southern Arizona, it hits a little closer to home.
Author Margaret Regan takes a look at what happens to undocumented immigrants who've been living in the U.S. for a long time and suddenly get caught. She joins us to talk about the book, Detained and Deported, Stories of Immigrant Families Under Fire. Margaret, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, I'm delighted to be here, Tina. Thanks.
And you've actually been writing about this topic for 15 years.
Yeah, that's right.
What started you on that path?
Well, I was a full-time reporter at the Tucson Weekly here in town, and in the year 2000, that was the first year we started hearing about migrants dying in the desert. So I went down to Douglas for a few days with the Tucson Weekly to find out what was going on, and I had the opportunity when I was down there to interview a man whose young cousin had died in his arms that day. They were from Guatemala, and he told me about the whole long and difficult journey coming up from Guatemala. And his only reason for coming was that he had 4 very young children that he couldn't feed. So he had made this long and difficult journey to try to support his family, as any good dad would. And then on the way, his young cousin died, and they were caught, and he was caught and deported. So very tragic story. And once I really heard that story from somebody who had been involved in it, that's what I really wanted to cover from then on.
Mm-hmm. And Margaret, again, you tell the stories of the lives of immigrants, and in your words, you like to put a human face on the issue. Now, why that approach?
Well, as you know, as we all know, there's such angry rhetoric about immigration in the United States right now. We can't seem to come to any agreement about it. But these are real people with real lives. I've talked to people down on the border who've been deported to Nogales who have little children in Phoenix. One young man I met was 25. He had lived in the United States since the age of 8. He got caught in Phoenix when a tail light on the back of his bike was out, ended up being cycled through the deportation centers, and then dumped in Nogales. And he said to me, I have 2 young children. I have a new baby and a toddler. He said, I don't know what my wife is doing. He'd been a hard worker. He worked as a landscaper supporting his family. So suddenly he was down there on the other side of the fence, and his wife was up here in Phoenix trying to figure out how to keep her kids going.
It is, and I know we're telling of these stories, like you said, they're putting a face to a headline, really.
Right.
But do we have any happy endings that come along with these?
Yeah, well, once in a while there's a happy ending. I have an excerpt from my book, appears in the Tucson Weekly this week, in fact. It's about a woman named Yolanda, again, like this other man, had lived here for many years, got picked up. She was put in the detention center for 2 years and separated from her 3 children, and they were little children. She hardly saw them because it's a big deal for somebody to take the kids out to Eloy detention centers in a remote part of Arizona. She didn't see them much at all, but she came to the attention of a lawyer from the University of Arizona Law School, Nina Regan, who worked like heck to get her out of there and following every legal avenue. And finally, she was able to successfully get Yolanda out of there, and she got her a visa to stay, and she's now back north of Phoenix at home with her 3 children, being the mom that she wants to be.
Wow, that is a good story.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned the detention centers. For those of us who don't know, what is it like in one of those here in Arizona?
Well, it's not supposed to be a prison, because people being held in the detention centers are being held only to ensure that they show up at their immigration hearings. But it's just exactly like a prison. I went there on family visiting day one day to visit this woman, Yolanda, I was just speaking about. And the families trying to visit their loved ones were all hurt. There were 100 of them in this lobby. It was an extremely harsh environment. The guards were scolding the children. There was no sort of feeling, oh, hi, honey, are you here to visit your mom or your dad today? They were just harsh and scolding. And the people tell me that in the detention centers themselves, there isn't so much physical abuse as verbal abuse and accusations of racism, frankly. A lot of the guards, they don't speak Spanish, and they get frustrated because so many of the detainees are Spanish speakers, and they appear to be disobeying the rules. They have a lot of complaints about their access to health care, and the food is of very poor quality. But, the biggest part about these detention centers is that the isolation from family. I've interviewed so many moms, and all of them said to me, I can put up with all the rest of it, but not being able to see my children is the worst part of it.
And I know the book now is kind of highlighting more the deportation and being detained, and your previous book was more about the journey coming here. Is there still a relation between the two books?
Yeah, I mean, I wrote that book. It was called The Death of Josseline, which came out 5 years ago. So many migrants were crossing into Arizona, and as we all know, we can see from the pictures we just saw of the Arizona desert, it is a treacherous place to go if you don't have enough water. And, we've had a large number of deaths in southern Arizona. We're at about 3,000 now deaths from the last 15 years. So that was a book about that tragic story, the difficulties of the journey, and what it meant for Arizonans, too, living here to sort of be living under a more militarized situation. This is a book about the people who actually made it here, and of course there are many of them who've been living here for a long time. It's the sequel, as it were. Those who came up and have been living here and established lives, a lot of them have American citizen children, and suddenly get caught and their lives change dramatically.
It is. Margaret, really quick, I know you have 3 events this week, and if people would like to learn more from you, right?
Yeah, that's right. I have 2 events at the Tucson Festival of Books, which I know you've been talking about it already. A wonderful event with 400 authors. I have a panel Saturday morning and one Sunday afternoon, and then late Saturday afternoon I actually have an event at Etherton Gallery downtown as part of the second Saturday.
Excellent. Margaret, thank you so much for coming on the show and talking about your book.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
And you can get Margaret's book by logging on to AntigoneBooks.com. You can also meet her at the Tucson Festival of Books and her discussion panels this weekend, as we said, at the U of A.